سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So Alhamdulillah, we now have reached to Halaqa 14 in Suluk, and we're talking about the Afat Lisan. So why don't we, can you come up a little bit? Yeah, move a little bit, so we're a little bit closer. Yeah. Like we feel like there's actual people, you know? Okay. Is it streaming now?
Yeah.
It's doing it? Okay. Alhamdulillah. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Unfortunately, also today, 6, 7 slides, which I took about an hour or so to prepare, they've also somehow vanished. Really having a very trying time with all of this technology. Allah give us tawfiq. Okay, so carrying on, continuing with the detriments of the tongue, the afat al-lisan. So we talked extensively about ghiba. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from that. And that is mentioning something about our brother or sister that they do not want to be mentioned. And in fact, it's true. So we talked about that in detail, it's kafara and all of that. So this next one is something very similar to ghiba. It's a type of ghiba, but it's a more specific one called namima. So namima, it roughly translates slander, defamation, calumny. But actually what it amounts to is that you are, it's a kind of ghiba. What a namam is doing, or the person who propagates a namima, he takes this particular information about someone and he goes around intentionally spreading it. So one thing, as I just mentioned, you know, about somebody, right? Something that they don't like, that's ghiba. This is even more disastrous because not only I'm talking about people behind their backs, I am actually consciously and conscientiously going around and spreading this information, you know, which is, it's originally a ghiba, but it expands into namima. And so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, what? La yadkhulu jannah qattat. Qattat is the same as namam, and it means this person who is actually doing this type of thing, right? Spreading these rumors, you know, among the people. And obviously it's going to, you know, it's going to create, you know, huge friction and huge, you know, difficulties and travail. So namima is generally referred to as relaying something negative or untrue about someone to others. But it also has a more broader definition, that is to reveal that which is disliked to be revealed, be it actions or be it words. If somebody said something, somebody did something, he has some characteristic, so going around and spreading this around and telling this to people, that person obviously does not like that. So it is a ghiba plus. And so all of those, you know, you know, detriments that comes to the muqtab, or the person who backbites. So he gets all of that plus, okay, and that's sufficient, you know, that Nabi says he wanted to enter the paradise with the other bid'ah. So he won't enter the paradise ever, or he won't enter the paradise in the beginning when the people who are the fa'izin, who are the successful, well, this one that excuses them. So if he has iman, then ultimately perhaps he will inshallah get into the paradise. However, and this is another, you know, trick of shaitan, okay, but you know, we'll eventually go to paradise because we have iman. So I probably mentioned this earlier also. Okay, so be it. But after how long? A day, a year, a millennium, a million years, or what, you know? And, you know, as I probably mentioned earlier also, that if we just take the smallest flame on our stove and for 1 minute, just put our smallest tip of our finger. Can we hold it there for a minute? So it's not the smallest flame on the smallest part of our body. It is, flames like, the size of mountains, which are 70 times hotter than the hottest flames of this world. And that's just a figure of speech. How hot is it? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And for how long one may have to suffer there. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. So this is very, very, very serious. And we're spending a lot of time on this because on the tongue. Because this tongue, subhanAllah, this tongue either enters us into paradise or takes us into the fire of hell. So it's a very critical thing to get control of this tongue. Allahu Akbar, as I probably mentioned also, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala used to catch his tongue, say, هَذَا الَّذِي أَوْرَدْنِي الْمُوَارِدِ. This is the thing that has taken me to the brinks of destruction, more or less. Okay, so for example, even to the extent, so the ulama mentioned that seeing someone hiding one's wealth, suppose somebody, like in the old days, people used to actually bury their wealth, they would have gold coins or something. So somebody was, didn't know that somebody was watching, and so he just, buried that in some place. So somebody went, hey, so-and-so, he was burying his, this is also in the namimah. Why are you spreading this news around? Why are you revealing this thing? Obviously, that person doesn't want that to be revealed. Okay? So we have to be very careful how we use the tongue. It's a double-edged sword. It either we cut with it or it cuts us. Okay. So now, to whomsoever namimah is relayed to, they must do 6 things. So suppose somebody comes and somebody brings this namimah, brings this, this type of information and wants to tell us something, so-and-so did this, so-and-so's like that. So number 1, we don't believe it. Okay? As the namam is a fasik, because the very fact that this person is coming and with this type of information, so that automatically labels the person as a fasik, as a sinner. And a fasik in Sharia law, his witness, his testimony is unacceptable. So that being the case, we cannot accept anything he has to say, because the very fact that he's engaged in such type of behavior, his witness, his testimony is unacceptable. So number 1, we have to not believe it and reject whatever it is he's saying. And number 2, prohibit the person and advise him. And why are you telling me these things? This is namimah. This is really bad for everybody. It's bad for you, it's bad for me. And I'm not going to listen to these things. And you shouldn't be saying things like that. So ask Allah to forgive you and don't do these kind of things again. So we have to advise this person. And thirdly, there's a quality. One of the qualities of Iman, yani al-hubbu fillah wal-bughdhu fillah. So loving something or someone for the sake of Allah and hating something or someone for the sake of Allah. It is we hate people because we're emotionally, turned off or turned on. We usually love because it's an emotional thing. Here it's an intellectual. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Maybe my nafs doesn't love it, but Allah loves it, so I love that thing. I love that person. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves me to love that person. He wants that type of, feeling. So I need to nurture that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes this type of behavior, and He dislikes people who behave in that way. So we also have to dislike that. And it's also important that we understand that we dislike that behavior. When we say we hate the person for the sake of Allah, so actually we don't hate his humanity, the fact that he's a human being. We hate his behavior. And at the same time, if we're really sincere in our bughd fillah, that we actually are hating this particular thing for the sake of Allah, then we would also ask, oh Allah, give this person afiyat, give this person tawfiq to, repent from this and ask forgiveness for him and cease and desist from such behavior. Okay, so these are the first 3 things. 4th, not to harbor ill thoughts of one's brother and sister who was slandered or whatever. So the whole PowerPoint thing was corrupted. I don't know how it happened. All these slides are corrupted somewhere or another. Anyway, so since this person has brought in, we don't accept his witness and we don't accept that behavior. So we also don't harbor any ill thoughts, for that person that was mentioned. We just take it totally take it out of our minds and hearts. And obviously, just as we said about riba, when people hear riba, so they want to find out the reality. So obviously, we're not going to involve in anything like that. If we hear such things, we negate it, and obviously, we're not going to be prompted to further search and spy and find out, is this real? Is he really doing that? Is that really happening? And then last but not least, not do what one has forbidden others by mentioning what was relayed to them to others themselves. So since we've forbidden this guy from saying things like that, so we have to be very careful that we don't mention this thing to anybody else as well. Some stories in this regard. So it's narrated that Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, now he was the Khalifa, he was the Umayyad Khalifa, probably the 7th Khalifa. And so somebody came to him and said, he said to this fellow, he said, I've heard that you're saying negative things about me, right? So the man says, no, I haven't done so. I haven't done that. So Sulaiman replied, but the person who told me that, he's honest, he's a trustworthy person. He told me that you said such and such. So the man replied, he said, the namam cannot be considered truthful. Just as we heard previously, right? So since the namam, the person who does that, has that type of behavior, that renders his testimony and his statements unacceptable. So whatever he has to say, it's unacceptable, so forget about it. So now in those days, even though the rulers, they might have had, you can find, a lot to say, perhaps negative, but they also had positive things, So even though he's the Khalifa, he said, well, you've spoken the truth. That's true. So he accepted that, and he said, so he said, idhab salima. Go ahead in peace. You said the right thing. So that's how we have to treat those kind of things, Squash it from the very bud, snip it from the bud, as they say. So we really need to, and as I mentioned in the khutbah today in Jummah, trying to bring this point to fore and emphasize this, that with all the social media flying around everywhere, this is just going front, right, front, left, right, front, center. It's just everywhere you go, it's all the ghiba and namima just floating around in cyberspace, and we're, the recipients of this in many cases. And so, it becomes all the more pertinent in this, time of social media. Okay, it's also narrated that Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, this is actually the main rawi of the Muwatta Imam Malik. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi is better known as, actually, Yahya ibn Abi Kathir is also known as. So he says, the namam destroys in an hour what the magician, we're talking about the black magicians, the ones who are connected with the jinns and the evil spirits, and that can cause a lot of travail, right? So he says this namam, he destroys in an hour what the magicians destroy in a month. And keep in mind, the whole story of the ifk, Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, the slander that was, perpetuated by the munafiqeen towards al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha. That almost brought the entire society of Medina to war. The Aus and Khazraj, long story, but it had such a huge impact, and there's huge lessons that we need to learn from that. And then there's another, he had this story that there was a fellow who was purchasing back in those days, there was the slave trade. We talked about the slavery, in different instances, and slavery was prominent throughout the world. And we also mentioned that even in Islam, although there is concession in certain instances, but it was quite a different type of situation than it was, here in the United States. In any case, so during the time when that was going on, so a slave was being sold in the market, and so the fellow who wanted to purchase that slave, so in the negotiation process, the person who was the owner of that slave, he said, okay, I'll sell him to you for whatever, but I'm not responsible for any namima or any lying or anything like that this guy might, Is it okay? Maybe he was selling him cheap, I don't know. But in any case, so he agreed with that, condition. And so the story goes like that. So anyway, so this slave, he was, pretty nasty guy. Maybe because he felt that being in slavery, he wanted to get back at his master or whatever, I don't know. But anyway, so he told his master, he said, you know what? He said, your wife has got some really bad intentions, She wants to do this, and actually she wants to actually kill you. Oh yeah? So then he went to the wife. He said, you know what? Your husband, he's thinking about taking more wives. He's thinking about buying more slave girls and, having affairs with them. Oh yeah? So if you want, I can try and get him to, kind of give up that kind of idea. But what you have to do is you have to take a razor and cut one of the hairs from his throat and bring that in. Then I'll do the rest. Don't worry about it. So, okay. So then he went back to the slave master saying, you know what? Watch out for your wife, because when you go to sleep, she's going to come and she's going to slit your throat. Be careful. So then, what happened? So now this woman says, okay, I just to get him to not marry and not, buy more slave girls and all that. So she, proceeded watching him. He seems to go going to sleep. So she goes to cut the hair. And now he's playing, he's asleep, grabs her, caught you. And he took the knife and slashed her throat. Okay. Now, the wife's family, obviously they're not going to stand by and just, well done and, so be it. So the family found out about it. They grabbed him and killed the husband. So what was the result? Both of them were murdered, as a result of what? An imam. Whether it's a true story or not, Allahu Alam. But things like that actually happen. And this quote unquote diplomacy, because the next thing we're going to talk about is Dhul Wajhain, the person who meets these fellows with a particular face, then he goes to these people and sees them with another face, So it's also all very much related. And so we'll go right to that. But we won't go to that because those slides are gone. So we have two options. We can either just read from the book, or we can just wait for that for the next one. Huh? You want to hear from the book? Are you enjoying it, huh? Okay, folks, what do you guys say? Should we read from the book or get the slides again? Huh? What do you think? Want to read from the book? Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so the next thing is what we call Dhul Wajhain. So the person, who has got, it's also a kind of ghiba, and it's also a kind of namima, and also it is an outright hypocrisy. And also nifaq is also, employed here. So yes. Kalam dhil lisanain, yataraddadu bain al-muta'addain. So what happens is generally is that you have two parties. You have two individuals, maybe they're at loggerheads with each other, or you have two groups in there. So what this fellow does is he's looking for his own personal gain from both. So and this is what diplomacy, modern diplomacy is all about, right? These diplomats, that's basically what they do, So they go to this party, hey, you're absolutely right. We're with you. Yeah, this guy, this. And then he gets what he wants to get, from this. And hey, I'm on your side. I'm here to help you. I'm here for you. Then he goes to the other party and says the same thing. Those guys over there, they're this and they're this. And hey, I'm with you. And don't worry, But of course, he will do that at a price, So generally, and always, there's some benefit for this guy, and that's what he's looking for. And he doesn't care whether he's destroying, what and who. And so this fellow, Nabi Sallallahu mentions, "Inna sharra an-nas dhul wajhain alladhi ya'ti ha'ulai biwajh wa ha'ulai biwajh." So Nabi Sallallahu says, the worst of the people, among the worst of the human beings on the face of the earth, are people like this. They go to these people with a wajh, with a face. In other words, with, a different story. And it's all hypocrisy and it's all simply for his own personal gain. And he cares little about either one of these parties, and he cares everything for himself. So, for his own personal gain, he meets these people with a particular narrative and a particular, in a particular way and style and speech and stance and everything. Then he goes to other people with the exact opposite. So this person is warned, that we are being actually warned by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, be careful of such individuals. So now, as I mentioned, there are diplomats, there's a thing called diplomats, that's basically what they do. So they're trying to, in many cases, they're trying to do exactly what I've just mentioned, because they have some ulterior motives. On the other hand, sometimes it's actually necessary to do something like that, but for a positive effect. Here we were talking about a negative impact. Sometimes we need to do stuff like that for positive effect. For example, between these two guys, there's animosity. So I go to Zayd. Zayd, look, Khalid, he's really sorry about all that he did, and he said it, and really he wants to make up for that. So I think you should really accept his apology. You really should. And actually, he never said that, and he doesn't have any intention for that. But I say that because I'm trying to make islah. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلى من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس ومن يفعل ذلك ابتغاء مرضات الله فسوف يؤتي أجرا عظيما. So there's no benefit in the gathering of most of the people in their interactions, except for people who are actually trying to do something like that. They're trying to actually create, peace and unity and good relationships between the people. So in that case, if a little bit of, twisting the reality, has to be done for the sake of a positive, positive impact, then here, there's no haraj on that, and in fact, that would probably be a very good course of action. And in fact, if the intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the ayat says, and whoever does so to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him an ajr al-azim, a very magnanimous reward for that. So that's the case. Now, however, having said that, that doesn't mean you can just outright lie, because you always, as we mentioned earlier, when we talked about kid, one of the biggest, diseases of the tongue is to tell lies. So we don't want to tell a lie. Even in this case, we would want to what we call toria. We want to say something that could imply, but it could. So we don't want to say, something which is untrue, directly and specifically and explicitly. But you can kind of, mold the speech, as it were, in such a way that maybe something else is inferred, something positive is inferred. So the main thing again is the intention. So in that case, that would be out of the classification of this dhil lisanain or dhil wajhain, which is mentioned both ways. The one with two tongues or the one with two faces. Obviously, he only has one tongue and he only has one face, but he uses it in a dual and juxtaposing such a way. Okay, last thing we want to talk about is praise. Now this is a very delicate issue, and we need to really understand this. So another, detriment or problem of the tongue is to praise people. What's wrong with that? That's good, that's positive, right? Well, maybe and maybe not. So, in praising people, we have to be careful about that even, because it could have a negative impact on the person himself or on the person who's being praised, the person who's praising or the person who is being praised. So, as for the person who is doing the praising, so number one, how does he know that that person is really like that? For example, somebody says, I give you an example. Uthman ibn Mad'un, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was the first person who died. We talked about him, I think. No, I don't think we talked in Sirah. But so he was the first muhajir to die in Medina. He also happened to be the brother in Radah. You know, they had the same wet nurse, Rasulullah and Uthman ibn Mad'un. And he was the first person of the muhajirin to die from a sickness that he contracted there in Medina. So now, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had actually, as you probably might have heard, he made, brothers, and sisters among the muhajirs, and the ansar. And in fact, originally they became just like their family members. They might even would have otherwise inherited from them, that the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam created such a bond between them. And that was, to make that unity among the migrants and among, the people of Medina, which was further, abrogated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you cannot become an actual blood relative unless you are a blood relative. In any case, so the house in which Uthman ibn Mad'un was made the brother of that household. So the woman of that household, when Nabi alayhi salatu was also there observing and witnessing, after he passed away. So she said, my shahadat in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has akramaka ya, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you ikram. Now this is, obviously he's a muhajir, he's a Muslim, he's a mu'min inshallah, he's a muhajir, he died of a sickness there in Medina, that would classify him as a shaheed. So he's been honored, right? That's what it would appear. But she said that I give witness that Allah has honored him. So does she know really that Allah has honored him? In the hereafter, we don't know who's going to get what. That's in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not, nobody can give witness for that. So Nabi corrected her. He said, how do you know? How do you give that witness that Allah has given ikram? She said, what do you mean? He's among the first of the Muslims, and he made a hijrah and he died like a shaheed. So if he's not been honored, then who's going to be honored? So Rasulullah said, look, I am the Prophet of Allah, and I don't know what's going to happen to even me or him or anyone else. He said, I hope the best for him. And we have all, reason to hope that inshallah he'll be successful. But we can't give, we say, a jazm. We cannot give a witness in front that we don't know that. So similarly, if we're going to praise, so-and-so he's a muttaqi. Sometimes people, they come say, this fellow, he's from the people of Jannah. How do you know? Did you see the Jannah and saw that he was in there? Or this fellow, and the other way also, this fellow, he's from the hellfire. How do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know this fellow is not going to die as a Muslim and you may die as a non-Muslim? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So, therefore, we're going to see that all praise is not bad. It's not that you can't pray. You have to be very careful. So we say, for example, this person seems to be a muttaqi. Seems to. We don't see behind the scenes. We don't know what's going on in people's minds and hearts. But according to what we see, and that's what we're supposed to say. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that if you have to praise someone, if you feel that it's necessary to praise someone, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also himself praised many of his companions. He praised Abu Bakr, and he praised Umar, and he praised Uthman and Ali, and so many of the Sahaba, right? But he praised them in such a way that it didn't have that, negativity or that defect. So the person who is praising, he cannot, what we call jazm, he cannot, give a witness to that. So as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, that if you have to praise someone or you are going to praise him, say, أحسبه كذلك والله حسيبه. I consider, it seems to be that he's like a muttaqi, or he seems to be a zahir, he seems to be a truthful person. He seems to be, wallahu hasibu. And Allah is the one who actually knows the reality, and He's the one who's going to take into account. And so, وَلَا أُزَكِّي عَلَى اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. And I don't, give a witness in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about the purity of anyone. So that's how we have to feel, And so, the person who's giving praise, maybe he says something that actually is not really true. And it might even be outright lies. He might be saying so and so is this and so is that, and actually he's actually the opposite. Furthermore, he might even be praising someone, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, despises this person. So he doesn't deserve praise. He deserves blame, if anything. So we have to be careful, right? And as for the person who's being praised, and here's where the other big problem comes. Suppose if we praise people, and really, with a lot of emphasis, then it might go to the fellow's head. Then what? Then will he remain praiseworthy? He or she? That will be the destruction. Person who thinks he's something, right? So that's going to be their destruction right there. That will be sufficient for their destruction. So arrogance or conceit. Yeah, people are saying this about me. I guess I am. Yeah. So what does the person who's being praised have to feel? Only those persons who are praised, will escape, the negative impact, who really know themselves well. Shaykh Hashim, he's this. Shaykh Hashim knows who he is and what he is. So whatever people have to say, I should know who and what I am. And as one of our pious ancestors, as he says, if people knew the reality, if this fellow who has praised me knew me like I know myself, he never would have said that praise, right? And one of our pious ancestors, someone was praising him. So he said, "Oh Allah," he said, "this person doesn't know me, but Allah, you know me. So in other words, excuse me, I didn't say this, this person said such and such about me, and I don't claim this. You know who I am, you know what I am, and that's sufficient, easy." So if we keep that in mind, then inshallah, hopefully, we'll, keep ourselves protected from the ill effects. So on the one hand, yes, for example, our youngsters, they do something good, and we praise them for that, and we motivate them, and that's something that definitely we want to do. And as I mentioned, Rasulullah also praised, so many of his companions. But see, how did he praise them? And so seeing the circumstance and keeping that in mind, and then also, if we are praised, then we have to realize that yes, he's praised us for one thing, and we know that we have 10 other things that, if they knew about, it would be a different story altogether. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to save our tongues from all of these detriments, and give us the cognizance to know ourselves and know that it doesn't matter what anybody says to us, praise or blame. The real thing is wow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah is pleased with us, then that's something to strive for. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blames us, that is something to be protected and be concerned about. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me and all of us tawfiq. Any questions or any? Yeah.
In the case of being devil-faced, in a situation of war, I think there was a situation in which
Absolutely.
There was, I think, the Battle of Khandaq, right?
Yeah.
The Sahabi.
Exactly. So that's what we mentioned. So it depends on the intention. And war, as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, al-harb khida'. War is treachery. It is this type of, that's what war is all about, But there's rules and regulations for that as well. For example, if you're in a pact, with a warring, but that's not while you're actually engaged in the warfare itself. But if you are in that type of situation with the people, and you have actually made a truce, and you feel that there's indications that they're going to break that truce, and you feel that they're not going to hold to their word. So what you do, we are ordered from the Quran, فَانْبِذْ إِلَيْهِمْ عَلَى السَّوَاءِ. So you inform them, look, this truce, we're not going to hold to it because we don't think you're going to hold to it. So just take your truce back and be forewarned. So even with our enemies, we have to be, there's rules and regulations. However, yes, warfare does bring those into play, just as we talked about, if you want to actually bring about some positive thing to to islah between the people, you know, you know, relieve that animosity or something, with this type of a thing. So the intention is positive, and the method is also within the bounds of Sharia. So it's fine. Not only it's permissible, it might be, it might be advisable, and it might be commendable, and it might even be compulsory, like in the condition of warfare, where you have lives of people at stake. So in that case, it may become a compulsory action.
Person finds himself or herself being a backbiter or a slanderer, if it's their habit and they want to get rid of it, what's the
how do they do it? Get rid of it.
The habit is like,
So it's a habit. So what you need to do is we need to keep hearing stuff like this. And if it becomes a habit, then we need to, however, the habit has become more deeply rooted. So we need to, like your molars, it really takes a heavy effort to pull it out, So if we got these deep-rooted habits, we need to do drastic things. We need to be hearing this kind of stuff again and again. And be cognizant of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, feels about these things, what Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned about these things. People are generally careless because either they don't know or they're not, they're in ghafla. They're not thinking about these things. These things are not being recited in front of them. They're not being reminded about these things. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ ذِكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So the reminder of that's why we have these durus. And when we have these durus, they should be repeated again and again until, the forever. This is part of targhib and tarheeb. One of the things is that motivation, it's not like we heard a motivational talk yesterday or last year, and so that's, one dose per life. It's like one dose as per need, on need basis. And the need for the human being to be motivated is continuously all the time. That's why we find in the Quran and in the Sunnah, we find targhib and tarheeb, the motivation, for Jannah. You do this, you go to Jahannam. This is what you'll get in Jannah. That's, most of the Quran is talking about that. The ahkam, out of 6,000 plus ayats in the Quran, you've only got maximum, 300 to 500 ayats, which are either directly, rules and regulations, or you could extract rules and regulations from them. It's perhaps maybe a sixth or less of the Quran. What's the rest of the Quran? It's all motivation towards proper belief, proper character, proper activity, relinquishing, wrong activity, wrong character, wrong beliefs, etc. So what's the ilaj? We just have to keep hearing, how terrible that is and what the consequences. Whatever other spiritual exercises we need to do, but that's a very, and unfortunately, people don't even, we can have a speech like this for an hour, and then definitely people are going to, right after the speech, they're going to go outside, and you walk by and they're doing it. It's mind-boggling, but subhanAllah. So also the tawfiq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's easier said than done, If it was so easy, then everybody would be going to Jannah. But there's a big Jannah, it's going to be filled. There's a big Jahannam, it's also, it's also going to be filled. So it requires effort, just like anything else, effort. Somebody came to one of our mashayikh, there was one Mufti Zain al-Abidin in Pakistan. So somebody came and said, Mufti Sahib, how do we, stop this wasawas in our salat? You understand wasawas in salat? I'm in salat and I keep hearing this and that, and I can't keep my mind focused in salat. So how do we do that? So just what I told you now? He said, just do it. No, but how? Do it. I need to walk to the door. So what do? You take this foot and start walking. It's not like rocket science, but it requires some effort. So what happens is that we don't want to put in that effort. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who put in an effort, then Allah opens up the way. No, but we don't want to do that effort. We want some shortcut. Give me some dua, give me some wadifa, give me some amulet I can wear. It's not like that. You know, just putting an effort and keeping in mind, making an effort to cure ourselves from this or to bring about Allah, the cure from Allah. That effort in itself is a very, very righteous action, and that's going to be rewarded highly. Even if we don't really reach the goal, but making an effort to reach that goal, that's actually the objective. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Allah, put us on the path. You know, we don't ask Allah to take us to the end of the path. Put us on the path. Once you put us on the path and we're moving on it, wherever you want to take us, we'll reach there. But the idea is to be on the path, you know. And so even if somebody's got this type of habit, and we all have a lot of, you know, very terrible habits, so we're on the path to try and resolve that. We make an effort to try and, you know, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very kind and forgiving. But we have to put in our best effort. And tawfiq is with Allah Azza wa Jalla. Wallahu a'lam. Is that clear, everybody? Allah make it clear for all of us. Anything else? No? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.